Hello, I'm Jeremy McMahon, meditation teacher, Tibetan Buddhist scholar, and audio engineer. And welcome to Meditating with Friends, a podcast where we explore meditation through friendly conversation. Each episode includes a guided meditation that you are invited to join. If you enjoy this podcast and are interested in working with me one-on-one to help deepen your meditation practice, check out my website, jeremymcmindfulness.com. Now, enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. It is your friend Jeremy McMindfulness here with another very special episode of Meditating with Friends. This week's episode, we are talking to Devaraj Sandberg. He's the founder of the School of Body-Based Therapy, and he specializes in teaching bioenergetics and Reichian therapy. Reichian therapy as it relates to Wilhelm Reich, the Austrian psychotherapist. So I have a little bit of a confession to make. As much as I like to, to help people, I am a meditation teacher. Bioenergetics really has been my primary practice for the past couple of years. As we get into the conversation, I won't get too much into the definition of bioenergetics, but simply put, it's a body-based form of psychotherapy. And for me personally, it's been absolutely and completely and utterly life-changing. I fully believe in bioenergetics, and I cannot speak to how much it's really benefited me in my life, and continues to benefit me as I continue to work through my physical tension and my physical armoring, as they put it in Reichian and bioenergetic terms. So it's really my pleasure to have Devaraj here, because Devaraj is the person who taught me bioenergetics, who still teaches me bioenergetics. And he is just really one of the most amazing resources that is available on the topic of this kind of niche, sort of weird, underground form of psychotherapy. So again, it's really my pleasure to have him here. Like I say in the interview, he's one of my, main teachers in my life. So I really thank Devaraj for being here with me today. So we'll get into, now you're probably like, what is bioenergetics? What is that all about? We'll definitely get into the podcast. We'll get into that during the podcast. Also, I will say I'm actually training to become certified in teaching bioenergetics. So hopefully, probably at the rate I'm going, probably early next year, I'll be officially certified through Devaraj's school, known as the School of Body-Based Therapy. You can check out the link to the school below. It is bioenergetics.org.uk. So again, I really enjoyed this conversation with Devaraj. Again, really important to me, really important teacher in my life. And I hope you enjoy his takes on the mind-body relationship as much as I have, because again, he's really, really been one of my main sources as I've gone into this exploration between the relationship of the mind and the body. Just a couple of other notes. I will go ahead and apologize for the audio quality on this episode. I think when I recorded it, I used my webcam mic instead of my really nice, expensive microphone that I generally use. So I don't sound the best, but I think you can still hear me. I think you can still understand what I'm saying, which is ultimately the most important thing. Also, I've been kind of MIA lately because I've started a new job, and it's been taking up a lot of my time. I'm very grateful for the job, though, and I am really enjoying it. But it's been kind of an adjustment, and of course, I'm sort of focusing on that and getting my mind wrapped around the job before I, run off and do all my millions of other little side projects. So you may not be hearing podcasts from me quite as frequently, at least for the time being. So just wanted to let you know that. This is going to be a great episode, so sit back, enjoy.
All right.
right. Hope everyone's having a good day. Welcome to another episode of Meditating with Friends. It is your friend, Jeremy McMahon, here with really my pleasure here to introduce, I would say, one of my main teachers in my life, Devaraj Sandberg. So, Devaraj, how are you doing today?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you. Yeah, I'm here in Kiev. It's rather cold, and the Soviet-style communal heating hasn't come on yet. But
oh yeah, yeah. I remember you were telling us about that in one of your meetings. I mean, it sounds a little rough.
Well, it's kind of cool in a way, I mean, it's got a sort of Soviet chic aspect to it, I guess, because I think there's some guy somewhere in the local council whose job it is to decide when the heating comes on for the whole of Kiev, like 2-3 million people who are living in blocks. But he obviously hasn't decided quite yet. But yeah, it's not been too cold today, so it's okay.
That's good. Yeah, it's a pretty pretty rainy and dreary here in New York. It's supposed to rain all day. So, it's a good time to get cozy, good time to hunker down and, get some work done. But so Devaraj, you've been teaching me bioenergetics for, I would say, about 2 years now. I mean, I've done, I'm on your second online course, training as a bioenergetics teacher. And, I have to admit, I've kind of kept bioenergetics a little bit to myself. It's sort of kind of like a secret thing that I've been kind of working on and haven't really presented much information about, particularly on my social media channels. So I guess let's start off really basic, but what is bioenergetics?
Well, I guess it is a little bit secretive in a sense, although the word itself was coined by a chap called Alexander Lowen, who was really a kind of follower or someone who trained with a once famous, somewhat notorious Austrian psychotherapist called Wilhelm Reich, who fled to the US in the late 1930s to escape World War II. And picked up a lot of people who were interested in his kind of style of body-based psychotherapy or body-based psychiatry. And Alexander Lowen did a lot of training with him, became a doctor, and which was a kind of prerequisite for working with Reich. And then started to develop his own kind of thing I think around the 1950s, which he called bioenergetics. So that's where the word comes from. And really all it is a series of kind of postures, most of which are static, some of which are active. And the static ones are basically you put your body in a certain posture and you breathe in a certain way and you endeavor to just keep feeling the body. And the active ones involve more movement, possibly synchronized with the breath. And, it might look a little bit from the outside like something you do in a gym or yoga or aerobics or something. But it has quite the muscle groups that it works are those which are particularly kind of important to anyone who's interested in trauma, because trauma, unprocessed emotional experiences, usually from childhood, are stored in the body at a muscular level. And so bioenergetics is a way that we can use physical movement to start to clear out some of this stuff. It's traditionally done as a kind of adjunct to psychotherapy, talking about your issues and your life and finding parallels between behavior now and what went on in your childhood and this kind of thing. And, bioenergetics was kind of added in as a body-based component. And it's a little bit secretive in the sense that it's also got quite a lot of people outside of mainstream Western culture who have practiced it, some shamanic groups, possibly even in Russia, certainly in South America, who, have been busy with bioenergetics or something very similar for, hundreds of years by the look of it. So it is kind of a secretive sort of thing, and no one really has any copyright or control over it either.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really good explanation and giving a brief history of it. But it is, like you said, it is like a body-based, psychotherapy practice. And I just found it really intriguing when I first discovered it, that, something like some body-based practice even came out of psychotherapy, because I think just in the Western culture, we just associate, psychology just mostly with the mind.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of where it's associated a lot now. And I guess, I'm trying to think back to Wright came from the school of Sigmund Freud, who kind of, was the father of psychoanalysis back in the late 1800s, the interpretation of dreams and these kind of books. And he developed a whole kind of school around him in Vienna, Austria, in the first part of the 20th century. And Wright came up through that kind of school for a while, and then as many later famous psychotherapists did, had some level of drama with Freud himself and the kind of substitute father, and then broke away and did his own thing, which is in some ways is just how it goes. But I mean, psychotherapy has always been interested in emotions, not so much like full-blown emotional expression, screaming and shouting and that kind of thing, but leading people into starting to feel their emotions has always been, I think, a significant aspect of psychotherapy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this all comes back to repression, right? That's what Freud was all about, that we're repressing these, impulses that we have due to, basically due to social rules.
Yeah, trauma and social conditioning and this kind of thing that was a big chunk of the theory. I think for myself, where I take it, it's more about really the sense of the body, and that's where it kind of comes in a little bit to meditation. Because if you just look at the bare bones of personal experience, I mean, we have kind of four categories of experience broadly, like sensory experience, the stuff that we can see around us and hear and taste, and other people can share most of those things, and then we have thinking, discrete little kind of chains of thoughts that pop through our minds, and, we can form concepts and beliefs and judgments and all sorts of things. And then we have feelings, human emotions, which are, anger, sadness, jealousy, emotional pain, grief, whatever, laughter. And then kind of underneath all of those things, there's just this raw sense of the body. And it's a little bit like the aspect of consciousness that we just reject or ignore, because particularly in today's world, it's not very sexy or exciting, being able to talk to people and, explore ideas on social media is exciting for most people. And, sensory experiences have always been exciting. And if you see someone in deep emotions, you're immediately attracted to look at them. Someone being angry in the street or crying their eyes out, we straight away look at it. But the sense of the body is just kind of, this thing in the background that no one really pays much attention to and is kind of marginalized. But in many ways, in a healthy personality, it's the kind of the coping stone or the foundation of a kind of healthy consciousness, really, that we have a good level of sense of the body, that we can feel our body quite deeply.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has made sense to me in my experience of just living. And I just wish, I kind of wish someone would just explain that to me earlier in my life, because I feel like, again, just living in the West and having, sort of this, as you said, the body isn't that sexy, which is funnier because it's what's sexier than other people's bodies, but we romanticize and emphasize, intellect and discussion and ideas and thoughts and being able to express thoughts. And I just found that in my life, whenever I was going through some type of difficult emotion or difficult feeling, it just would have been helpful for me to recognize that this experience, that the main place where these feelings are playing out was in the body. And that that I just, you can't
think your way out of emotions a lot of the times, like I feel like in my internal dialogue I would have with myself, I try to basically argue with myself and give myself reasons for why I shouldn't be feeling a particular way to get me out of it. And that just seemingly like never worked.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I think we all go through, phases of doing that. And in a sense, it's almost useful when they fail, because it can drive us to find a more authentic way, and to actually allow a feeling without our mind trying to guide it or direct it or put it in a category of psychological experiences or whatever. Usually when I'm closing sessions, I just remind people that, if deep feelings are coming up later, or deep feelings, whatever, they feel, anxious or something, to actually just focus on the body and just feel the body. Just feel it's almost underneath the emotions. The sense of the body is there. And that's really where the deepest level of processing can take place. And yet often what happens is emotions start to come from the feeling in the body. Then there's emotions. Then there's judgments about the emotions and whether it's okay for us to have them. And then we're in some kind of diversionary behavior, the bottom line of which is that we're not allowed to feel what we're feeling. We're just feeling. And so nothing ever really processes, because we're constantly trying to change our state when some part of us is perceiving that we're in a certain state. It doesn't want us to feel it. And, so literally someone can go through their entire life, not processing just something really, really basic, which maybe isn't even that big a deal, and living their life in relative anxiety the whole time, because they never really were in a place where they could simply allow this sense underneath to just process.
Yeah. Totally. I totally agree. And I feel like bioenergetics, like you said, you can just sit there and feel the body. But even like explaining that to people, saying, feel your body. I've noticed that a lot of people are like, what does that even mean?
Well, also, for sure, a lot of people are like that, but also, having just explained, that the sense of a body is where the deepest processing takes place. Of course, we think like, okay, let's just feel our body and be free of all this kind of trauma or stuck energy in our system. But, the muscles tend to lock up everything kind of once we've been in a kind of defensive behavior around trauma for a period of years. It's kind of locked in, and there's not like a switch that we can push, but just allows repressed feelings or this repressed sense to come up and out. And so our body tends to feel kind of numb, and it's not a very exciting thing to focus on. If we're, doing a 20-minute meditation, we're supposed to be feeling the body. We're probably going to, within a few seconds, I'll just start thinking about what I'm having for dinner, or this or that or whatever, and we just drift around here, there, and everywhere, because the body is not really open enough, for the feeling of it just to be exciting. But when you get it more open, and it's taken me a while, and I feel like I'm still in many ways in first stages of it. Sometimes I can just sit down, and it's actually really exciting to feel the body. It's not that it's like loads of emotions going on. It's not that there's loads of thinking going on, but it's just actually really exciting. And my attention is quite happy to be in the body, for a period of time, and that's like a very new experience for me. It's like now it's possible to meditate because the sense of the body is kind of quite deep, and there's all sorts of things going on in it.
Yeah, I definitely feel that way too in terms of my bioenergetics practice. Like even last night, I wasn't tired, but I was like, I'm kind of bored, and I don't really have anything else to do today. So like, I'm just going to get into bed and just lie and feel my body, and, just get in touch with my body for a while. And it does feel really good once you've built up that certain level of bodily awareness, like you said, you can realize that there's a whole lot going in the body that you can kind of participate in. And that really is kind of where a lot of the times most people feel most alive is when they're really connected to their body.
Mm. That's it. I mean, it's meant to be like a vibrant, it's a good word, a vibrant sensation, our body,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe if we've been like, we're in our 20s still, where we've been dancing half a night or something, you can feel that kind of sense of, energy streaming through the body and this kind of flowing
Mm-hmm.
aliveness, which is very exciting. But of course, that wears off, and then we get a bit older and we don't go dancing so much or whatever. And it's kind of, life becomes a bit kind of rigid and set on a kind of track. And it's a little bit how it is. But also, if we keep opening up this vibrancy inside, it keeps things juicy and exciting as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I've totally found that, and just like, yeah, like over the past couple years of doing the bioenergetics, like I just feel like now, yeah, I just feel all my emotions more in like a good way, and like I feel like I laugh deeper, like I have more deeper belly laughs. I laugh louder, like so I really do think it's a really important practice that really can be done by anybody, by most anybody. So I just want to get the word out there about this stuff because I do think it's really powerful, and in a lot of ways, I think, yeah, has really helped me in all of my other practices, particularly meditation, which we'll definitely talk about in a bit. Yeah, it's just really showed me that getting in touch with my body. I think so much of like my mental health problems or mental health struggles have just been because I feel disconnected from my body.
I think that's pretty. I think that's pretty normal. Really, it's a little bit crazy in a sense that this stuff isn't better known because obviously, I mean, a part of it is, I guess, you can't make a lot of money out of it, and so there's not much kind of corporate appeal. I don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
political or something, but of course, medicines or techniques or whatever that that can work financially for a company tend to get prioritized, and
Right.
just trying to get into the sense of a body when also we don't have so much science really kind of investigating these things or able to back it up. It's like, it's a little bit crazy when I look around at some of the level of mental health crisis, particularly in this kind of COVID times, that are going on, where people have, they haven't been able to get the natural kind of connection with others that they were used to. And maybe they're not even conscious of that really, but it's just affecting their mental health a lot, and depression and anxiety. And there is quite a lot from the body-based schools that you can do about these conditions. And it's not a quick fix, and it's not all scientifically proven in the kind of traditional sense. But in my
Mm-hmm.
experience around the therapy scene, 20 years in this scene, there's absolutely quite a lot that you can do. And you have to work at it. It's not a cure,
Yeah.
but there is a lot you can do. And, we're not really doing it. And it's kind of a shame. It's kind of a shame. I mean, here in the UK, they've made some progress where, like the NHS, which is like the state medical system, you can now get prescribed to learn mindfulness. John
Mm-hmm.
Kabat-Zinn style mindfulness for chronic pain, when there may be no other treatment but to just accept that
Mm-hmm.
feeling, and also for stress reduction. So
Mm-hmm.
and so that's hopeful. That these kind of ideas can come through a little bit, and people can be exposed to alternatives, when previously they've only really been offered pills or sometimes some very formulaic psychotherapeutic kind of tools, and those haven't, for whatever reason, worked for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the stats, at least for the United States, I imagine it would be similar in the UK and Europe, that like we're losing this mental health battle. To be frank, it's just
Mm.
like anxiety is on the rise, depression is on the rise, suicide is on the rise. I've talked to I've been working on this paper writing about mindfulness in schools, and I actually interviewed a counselor, and she was just like, "Yeah, kids are like way more stressed now, basically, than they were 15 years ago. I think we are kind of in the midst of a mental health crisis, and especially, with the lockdown and with COVID, of course, I think it was already kind of there, and then this lockdown happened and, just exacerbated it. So I do think, basically at this point, a modern psychotherapy, it's kind of failed us, to be frank. And I think part of the reason why it's failed is because it's ignored the body and getting in touch with the body. And I mean, I think we do see the tide shifting, and I know you've talked about, I've certainly, seen it over the past few years of getting into Wilhelm Reich and bioenergetics and Alexander Lowen and all this stuff, that, it's definitely, there's more information out there about it now than there was a few years ago. But yeah, I mean, and also like the book, The Body Keeps the Score, I'm seeing more and more people read that book. And that book, for those of you who aren't familiar, discusses, it doesn't really reference Reich or Lowen, but it definitely discusses these ideas of how trauma is stored within the body. And so, so I just think, this body-based, psychotherapy, these body-based psychological practices are really going to be the key for the future, in terms of dealing with, our mental health struggles, particularly as, more and more of our life, moves out from the physical sphere into more of the digital sphere.
Absolutely. I mean, at the moment, we just seem to be ramping up the pressure on the average kind of human being in the West, but I don't know, at some point, hopefully there has to be some kind of, someone has to stand up in government or something and say, look, this is a crisis. It's a full-blown crisis. And actually we need to take some more action. And if what we've been doing in the last 50 years isn't really working, we have to be open to a few different ideas. I mean, I would be completely confident if I was looking at people with basic low-level mental health conditions, such as basic anxiety or depression, that 60 to 70% of them could be pretty strongly served by, small group therapy sessions, doing some bio, having some sharing, maybe some physical contact, and just, basically getting social contact and some body work. I'm sure that, at least because I've worked with people for a long time, 60 to 70% of people would be pretty much stable with that. They would be basically stable. It might not resolve everything totally, but they would basically be happy. If you monitor them coming out, they'd say, wow, that was great. And yeah, I feel much better now, and I'll come back next week or whatever, It's not even like a really complicated thing. But to get to a position where that can actually be offered is not very easy, because of all the mechanisms of government and all the different kind of people who are involved in the healthcare system and whatever. You can't just really override it like that. You can't override it. So you have to go through the system, and it's just so incredibly slow, and there's vested interests at every level as well. It's like, unfortunately, probably things have to come to a point where there's literally a full-blown crisis, which is absolutely affecting the kind of gross domestic product of the country, or and that someone somewhere says, look, we have to start to do something, because it doesn't need to cost very much. It's really feasible, and it won't cure everybody, but you could take a big chunk of it out, and it's just it's a system what we've got, and the system just is really limited functionality, and it's overly reliant on a kind of financially incentivized science, or institutionally incentivized science as well, and it's just we're kind of almost at the end of some kind of era where hopefully something can break open and change can happen, but at the moment it's like the institutions and the corporate structure around medicine are just kind of pushing hard with all the COVID things going on, and ramming their narratives out there into the world, but they don't have any solutions for all of these mental health conditions. They just don't have any solutions for them.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and it's just all, I mean, I kind of delved into watching, Adam Curtis documentaries this year, and just like, his whole, just like, the market controls everything, it's like, it's just what you're saying about like healthcare and like the healthcare market, it's like, well, they're not going to push things unless you can make money off of it. And the thing about bioenergetics is that it is very, very simple, at its core. And, you could teach somebody the bow and the arch, which are like the two most basic kind of cornerstone postures of bioenergetics, and, just have them do that every day on their own time. And, that doesn't cost them any money, and it only takes you a few minutes to teach them. So, the advantage of it being kind of simple, becomes a disadvantage, I guess, when marketing it.
Well, to a degree, I mean, and to be fair, it's like, it's not just corporations or financial interest. That actually could work the other way. The government could say, look, scientists, we need to sort this out, research anything you can, and the money will be there because we'll be saving it from the public purse. But there's also the institutions in there as well, and the institutions have been doing things their way, which is to a degree functional, for, really most of the institutions are rooted more in the kind of feudal Europe, really, from the 14th, 15th centuries, and they're still chugging along. And they will exert a high degree of control on how medical knowledge is acquired and then how medical knowledge is distributed. So it's all locked up together. There's no point in really kind of running it down. It's just become increasingly clear that a much more decentralized system would probably be much, much more functional. And, I also don't like to go down that road, which some kind of alternative practitioners do, of suggesting that, just use this kind of alternative way and everything's just going to change and be wonderful and be very simple. It is not. It is not easy to get people to do bioenergetics every day, even the bow and the arch. It is not easy because at some point you will not really want to do it, and especially when significant moments of change are coming, because essentially, our brain is the product of evolution, some billions of years of evolution, and it's got bugs in it, basically, but just like software with bugs in it. And, when there are defenses which operate subliminally, and they can be triggered by something that's disturbing on the outside, neuroception, but the same means subliminal triggering of defenses, autonomic nervous system, but they can also be triggered by something that's being stirred up on the inside. And, through doing bio or doing, some kind of body practice. And, they will, their job then is to get you out of that posture and out of that feeling without you really being aware of what's happening. And so, just doing a practice like bioenergetics, I'm regularly finding myself spacing out a bit, getting lost in thoughts, or, I suddenly just don't want to do it anymore. My mind comes up with a really convincing argument as to why I shouldn't do it right now. And I had to teach myself to use those kind of moments as a signpost, and to just stick with it, because it's usually a sign that something is trying to move. But it's a slightly long-winded way of saying that, like, just giving bioenergetics to people, you also need to have some kind of structure, some kind of social connection, accountability, so that people can get into it and get some kind of social support from it as well, like other people who are doing it, they can share with, and they can talk about what's going on, because as you start to open up the body, you feel more open yourself, and you feel more confident to speak about what's really happening in your life. We've learned to suppress a lot of our natural feelings and to not talk about what's going on, for men in particular, women less so, to not talk about the bits of our life which we're struggling with. And because we don't talk about it, then it just kind of increases in its negativity and its negative effects on us, and so, it's not a straightforward kind of solution like a drug, but it's definitely doable, and in a kind of mature and intelligent, explaining way, we could be really taking on large numbers of people who are struggling, and with some basic level of screening, and then putting them into group sessions. And I'm willing to bet that a very significant number of them would be quite off medication pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think so too. Bioenergetics isn't necessarily the be all end all for health, but it's I think it's definitely a tool, and a very valuable tool at that. Now, I did want to ask you, because this is supposedly a meditation podcast. I do like to veer off just the topic of meditation, but in your mind, I was wondering, what do you think are the similarities between, a bioenergetics practice and mindfulness meditation?
Well, I sometimes refer to bioenergetics as like mindfulness 2.0, which is not meant to be disparaging towards original mindfulness, because I'm quite a fan of the Buddha and stuff. But like, it's like, instead of kind of, you can sit and practice Vipassana, and maybe something opens in your body and you can have a deep transformational experience, or you could simply be in this way of watching what's going on inside, witnessing, and you kind of transcend it in some way. The latter is a little bit more looked upon with some kind of skepticism these days, I think quite realistically. But nevertheless, there's nothing wrong with meditation, but ideally you want to be quite rooted in your body to do it, and then it can be quite a deep transformational experience. And so just sitting there, you're in a sense kind of waiting for muscles to open and for stuff to come out so that you can feel and process through it. But you could also go and open those muscles up. So that's what bio's doing. Basically, it's starting to put certain muscle groups under pressure, and then in that pressure, it's a little bit like kind of you find an old dishcloth under the sink and it's all gone hard and you can't do anything with it. You put some water on it and you squeeze it around and it starts to become functional again. And our muscle system will do the same. It will release the past. And so I like this combination of doing bio and then doing, basic Vipassana meditation. I think it does add something to the Vipassana.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And like, if you study Buddhism or Hinduism, and you find out pretty quickly, that yoga, the idea behind yoga, was that it was meant to be. And when I say yoga, I mean like stretching, stretchy yoga, hatha yoga. That was meant to be a warm up for meditation, and when teaching meditation in the West, they kind of cut that part out. They're just like, oh, just sit there. They don't acknowledge that history of doing something physical with your body before you meditate. And so, yeah, I totally agree that I think the bioenergetics and mindfulness meditation go, hand in hand, because basically you're doing the same thing in both, in my mind. You're paying attention to the body. It's just bioenergetics. You're holding a particular posture, and you're breathing more in a particular way. Generally when you do bioenergetics, you breathe with your mouth open, so that you're bringing in more air, more oxygen. So yeah, you're kind of doing the same thing. It's just with bioenergetics, you're holding a posture, whereas meditation, you're holding a posture, but it's not as an intense posture generally. So yeah, I think the two again go perfectly hand in hand. And for me personally, doing bioenergetics has really improved and deepened my mindfulness meditation practice as well. So yeah, I think again the two go together perfectly.
Yeah.
So now that we've talked a bit about meditation, Devaraj, would you feel like leading us in a meditation practice, a bioenergetically informed meditation practice, maybe?
Yeah, sure. Or slightly Reichian informed, perhaps, was what I was thinking of, because obviously this is just an oral podcast and it might be a bit tricky to explain positions as we mentioned ourselves. But, something I really got turned on to in the last year was the importance of belly breathing. And that, when I was doing a lot of therapy about 15, 20 years ago, they would always say, breathe with your belly, but no one ever really fully explained to me exactly what that meant. And at some point, through a rather long process, I came to understand it. And it's actually very handy when to just sit and to breathe in this way. Because if you look at mammals breathe, like you look at a dog or a cat, when it's kind of relaxed breathing, what you'll see is it's actually initiating breath from its abdominal muscles. It's ballooning the abdomen out, particularly the lower abdominals. And when we push our abdomen out, consciously, then our lungs are drawn down. And if our throat is relaxed and our mouth a little open, or our nose is anyway open, then air will just naturally come in. And then if we relax our abdominals and then push them back in a little bit, then the air is just naturally pushed out. So, observing mammals at rest, you see that this is how they breathe. And yet humans, at least a good 99%, probably higher, do simply not breathe like this. We breathe using upper parts of the chest. We use the muscles around the neck and the throat, like the sternocleidomastoid and the scalenes. And by breathing with these muscles and kind of sucking air in and blowing it out again, it's like we're keeping ourselves in a kind of fight or flight reflex most of the time. And, obviously, if you're in a fight or you're exercising or whatever, then that's pretty reasonable and fair enough. But if you're actually just trying to relax, you don't really want to be using these muscles to breathe with. So I thought what we could do is just, I could just guide anyone listening just to sit down, either, just sit on a chair, ideally so that your feet can be flat on the floor, or to sit on a cushion, however you like to sit on the floor or something like this. And then what we're going to do is, like, with eyes closed, just start to balloon the belly out, literally consciously make your belly stick out. And trying to do that with a relaxed throat. And if your mouth a little open, or your mouth can be closed and the air can come in through the nose, it's fine. And then kind of ballooning it out for like 3 seconds, and then just relaxing and pushing it back a little bit. So just for like 5-10 minutes, we can do this and simply practice breathing with our abdominal muscles, and at the same time feel the abdomen as we're pushing it out and bringing it back in again. And ideally kind of feel the throat a little bit and try to have it relaxed. And we just kind of get into this for something like 5 minutes. Do you think, Jeremy? What do you think's good?
Yeah, 5 minutes would be great.
Okay, so if you take a moment just to sit yourself down and get yourself a bit comfy, you don't have to be uncomfortable. It's totally fine to sit in a chair. And then closing the eyes, just feel the throat and try to have it relaxed, but not worry if we judge it as not very relaxed. We just do our best in the moment, and that'll be good enough. And then consciously balloon your belly out, particularly your lower abdomen if you can. And if your throat is relaxed, air will just kind of come in naturally without us having to suck it. And then after a couple of seconds, just relax the belly back and squeeze it back in just a little bit, and air will go out. So we're going to continue like that for a few minutes. Every now and again, I'll remind you just to stay with it. And ideally, a cycle of breath should take between about 5 or 10 seconds, or perhaps a little bit longer. But, it shouldn't be a whole cycle of breath any quicker than 5 seconds. Okay, so we can just begin. Just gently ballooning that belly out and then relaxing it back in. Keeping the throat relaxed. And just staying really present with our sense of our body. Feeling that belly as we push it out. And then relax it back in. And trying also to feel our throat. Trying to just allow it to be like a simple channel through which air can come in and out, driven by these belly movements. Continue consciously pushing that belly out as far as it will comfortably go, then relaxing and contracting. Trying to keep our airways relaxed. Continuing to stay present with our body in these movements, just for another minute or so. Trying to just let go control from the throat. Let the belly run breathing. And then in your own time, just no longer following this breathing practice, and just gently opening your eyes and coming back to the space around you. Bring this little meditation and belly breathing practice session to a close. hopefully it was interesting. Sometimes what people tell me is that I've experienced it myself is at a certain point of doing this, we hit a kind of layer of fear because we're so used to controlling the breath from the throat and the throat muscles. And it's like our mind doesn't really trust that actually we are mammals and we can breathe with the belly. And when we continue through that slight fear, then it's like something really deep happens. So I hope you had a good experience.
Yeah, thank you for that. I had a good experience. It's always good. Well, at least in my case, to start the day with a little Reiki and breath work, and I guess in your case, you're kind of wrapping up the day with it. But yeah, and what you said about the fear, yeah, I definitely have experienced that myself too. That like you keep breathing and you kind of get more warmed up and you're breathing deeper and deeper and deeper, and you do kind of get this sort of rush of anxiety. But if you just keep on breathing, you kind of break through that layer. And I know for me personally, it definitely definitely a lot of interesting stuff starts happening in the body in terms of feeling, energy flowing through different parts of my body. This came up in my mind during the meditation, but if maybe you could talk a little bit about maybe like the relationship between like bioenergetics and like kundalini or like subtle body energy stuff. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I had a kind of kundalini experience, I guess you could call it that, when I was a lot younger and traveling in Thailand back in my 30s. And yeah, I mean, I didn't even know what it was. It was just a kind of explosion thing in my head for a while, and then I just forgot all about it because I didn't really have any context to place it in. But because of that, and because then I got into the sort of new age alternative spiritual scene, particularly around Osho, and lived in an Osho community in the UK for like nearly 20 years, I met a lot of people who were kind of busy with kundalini and that they'd had an energetic experience of some sort. There were all sorts of different types, but that they'd had some kind of like experience of their energy kind of waking up in their body. And in traditional Hindu culture, I think there's a famous old British general or something that wrote this book called The Serpent Power or something back about 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And he described kundalini as kind of, this using Hindu metaphors as this kind of snake curled up in the bowels that could be awoken by certain breathing practices or body movement practices. And what I've come to understand, and that then it would kind of, the energy would flow up the body, maybe up the spine or some kind of etheric version of the spine, and activate the chakras, somatic centers and this kind of thing. And to be honest, whilst I'm totally open to these ideas, and I've been around this scene and I've had Kundalini experiences myself, I feel like my role more with this stuff is to really kind of keep people a bit grounded, because some people who get into Kundalini can kind of lose it a little bit and go off in a spiritual world a bit, and sometimes that's not really so useful for them. Sometimes it's a way of avoiding, when you have an energetic experience in your body, really, mostly what you seem to need is to find a way of really processing and resolving stuff that happened in your childhood. And, traditional psychology and body-based therapy is the kind of things that are more useful for that. And maybe for someone who's got a lot of trauma and who's kind of a bit dissociated, they might just want to talk about spiritual things and understand it in terms of chakras, which is okay. But you just need to find some way to kind of really ground yourself and slowly open your body up and allow whatever's happening to happen. So I'm not, like a big spiritual type of person, and I don't really teach those things so much. I feel like there's plenty of other people who do that. I lived for a long time in the west of England, and throw a stone, throw a stick, and you'll hit a spiritual teacher. Certainly around the Glastonbury area.
Yeah.
So I'm more on the kind of grounding path and that kind of thing, that come back to earth kind of bit rather than go up into the heavens kind of part. But I think all these things are interesting. I think they're interesting. And, like I say, I've had experiences myself. So, I'm not someone to be too skeptical or to be denying.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I guess maybe I just feel like I'm really aware of the energy flow in my body. And I guess the thing that makes me think about how bioenergetics relates to that type of stuff is just based off of my experience of doing, Tibetan Buddhist tantric stuff, tantric practices, and just like the similarities between the two in terms of like what I feel happens in my body. There's differences too. It's interesting how there's like kind of different flavors. I don't know. In my experience, it seems like there's different like flavors of energy flow in the body, and so the tantric stuff does feel slightly different than the bioenergetic stuff. But it's a lot of it to me is at least the felt sense of what I experience in the body. To me, again, has oftentimes been similar with doing both of those practices. So yeah, I just wanted to ask you about that and your opinion on that. So thank you. In terms of wrapping up, I think this was a great conversation. And like, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for, thank you for teaching me. Thank you for teaching all of us about bioenergetics. I mean, I'll go ahead and say, like, if you want to learn about this stuff, Devaraj is the guy. His YouTube channel is unparalleled when it comes to information about this stuff. And then, of course, there are more structured online courses that Devaraj offers. You want to give a quick plug for yourself and all the things that you offer?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's quite easy to find me if you just put Devaraj, which is Devaraj, and bioenergetics into Google. You're going to come across my website and my YouTube channel pretty quickly. But my website is also bioenergetics.org.uk. And I've got online courses. I've written a couple of books, which you can get either physical copies or the ebook versions. And I've got a lot of free material. It's a bit chaotic and sprawling, but there's plenty of material on my YouTube channel that you can check stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm totally into this stuff. I do it every day. I do it every morning. I'm doing bio, and if I go down the gym, I'll work a little bit of bio into my workout. So I'm really into this stuff myself, and I'm basically enthusiastic about it. And it's also what I didn't really say about it, but what I love about it is, I do it in the morning, and I'm 60 years old and kind of old, and I've savaged my body in my earlier years with alcohol and things like this, but I can still be, after a half an hour workout with the bio, totally functional, totally positive, totally resilient for the day, and just having energy, so it's like, it's just a really, really useful, practical thing to get into.
Yeah, I totally feel that with my bioenergetics practice too. Like, it does open you up, create a sense of energy, but also, kind of, like you said, grounds you. It gives you this sort of sense of resilience throughout the day. But again, thank you so much for being here, Devaraj. We'll be sure to have all the links to your website and your YouTube channel and anything else you want in the description below. So for those of you who found this interesting, be sure to check out Devaraj and his material. And we will catch you next time.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Jeremy. It's been very lovely.
Awesome. Thank you, Devaraj.
This has been another episode of Meditating with Friends. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to learn more about my meditation teachings and programs, check out my website, jeremymcmindfulness.com.